Welcome back to Skybound Ops. I'm Ralph Merhi, and this is our podcast that dives deep into the people, the platforms, and the possibilities that are basically shaping aviation. And today I'm thrilled to welcome Mark Roboff, a global leader in or at the intersection of aerospace, AI, and digital transformation. Short story, I recently met Mark through a mutual connection, and we talked a couple of times, and I absolutely loved what he had to say. And I was lucky enough that he said yes when I asked him to be on this show. Mark is the Chief Vision Officer. I like that, and the founding CEO of SkyThread. SkyThread, if you haven't heard of it, is a groundbreaking aviation data platform. And what he does also is he chairs the industry's leading AI certification body. I hope I say this right, the SAEG 34 committee. Did I get that
That's
right?
right. Yep.
And with roots going back to Carnegie Mellon and leadership roles at IBM, we're going to talk about all of it, including Spark Cognition and DXC somewhere in the middle. Mark's career, it actually reads like a blueprint for the future of aviation, and I'm excited to talk to him. So we're going to talk about, how standards are born, what it takes to scale trust in AI, and how data transparency is finally catching up, because I think that's huge for aviation and aerospace. So whether you're a systems thinker, compliance pro, or just curious about automation or autonomous tech, how it's reshaping aviation, this episode, I hope, will give you a front row seat. So let's dive right into it. Mark, good morning to you, and welcome to
Morning.
the show.
Thank you.
I'm glad that you were able to join us. I'm grateful for it. So I want to make sure to say thank you. So where are you calling from in today?
I'm calling from sunny Irvine, California.
That
Orange
is
County.
sunny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't be jealous. I'm in sunny Florida, so I'm glad we have that in common. I know there are some
Uh-huh.
people in the middle that wish that they weren't really there.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start off with a couple of easy ones. Any recent travel that sparked any curiosity lately?
Oh, well, I used to travel, 200,000 miles a year for the last 10, 15 years. This year, I'm not. I've only done two trips, but I'll have to say the last trip I did was to London.
Oh, wow.
I was speaking at the inaugural Avionics and Testing Conference that grew out of the older Aerospace Tech Week show, and I was there with my good buddy from Airbus, Gary Brown, who is one of their safety engineers.
Hmm.
Been working on this thing around the data lifecycle and AI and safety. We presented uh, essentially an overview of how we believe AI is going to make not just aircraft safer, but how it will reinforce the design and engineering process in aviation
Interesting.
and improve just the safety outcomes of that process. And I was a really good got a good response at a great time. It was nice to be back in London. I hadn't been there in a couple of years, and yeah, that was a few weeks ago. And now I'm enjoying again more time at home.
Amazing. I'd love to go back to London. It's been a while for me. But let's start nearly at the beginning, if you don't mind a little bit. A couple of
Please.
questions. I know you studied at Carnegie Mellon.
Mm-hmm.
How did that lead you into aviation and technology? I'm curious
It,
about that.
well, it didn't. I've been a technologist my whole life,
Okay.
and I've been passionate about aviation ever since I was 3 years old. And was traveling down with my parents to visit relatives in Florida, as one does when they grow up, in suburban New York City. And my focus at Carnegie Mellon, I mean, it was computer science, but it was also very much around public policy, which given the work I do around AI in the regulatory space, has served me very, very well. But none of this was predestined. I left school, joined actually a stock digital photo agency, so a digital stock photo agency out of college as a software developer,
Wow.
and that's where did that for the next 5 years, and it wasn't until I joined IBM that I had a chance to um, engage with the aviation industry, which is again industry I've long been passionate and knowledgeable about, and just leveraging my time there is where I was able to, recenter my career around aviation and aerospace. So that's really
That's
what I
that's
do. Yeah.
that's really amazing. It's funny how life sort of takes over and brings you around ultimately back to where you need to be for different reasons. I completely relate, but I'm glad you told us that. Do you remember what the first aha moment was for you when you said, "This is it"?
For me, it was probably well. This is it in terms of aerospace and aviation, or this is it in terms of technology, or
Well, I mean, if I had to pick, I'd say maybe a little bit of both. At some point,
okay.
they sort of came together. At some point, it made sense.
For me, it was probably at IBM where just given a lot of the, I was running a $150 million product focused around advanced natural language processing and content analytics, doing a lot of work in automotive and in industrial.
Okay.
And uh, I at the time that's where I really began traveling a ton.
Okay.
And I'm someone that always draws energy from being on the road. I like travel. I've always loved airports.
I
Um,
can relate.
I'm an av geek, extreme, always have been.
Uh-huh.
Um, I realized as I was sitting on a plane that a lot of what I was doing in automotive and in medical devices and in other heavy industrials is relevant to aviation and aerospace.
Hmm.
And at that time, I had Airbus as a customer of my product,
Okay.
and had an opportunity to go visit them relatively early in my IBM career. Through that work, and through that realization of how much I've just loved this industry and how relevant the things I was working on could be to aerospace, that's when I was able to orchestrate a shift. And
Okay.
ultimately, I became the global solution leader for aerospace and defense for IBM, and did a lot of work back then. And this was, well, 10 years ago, but did a lot of work back then on the digital thread and the digital twin, but really found a niche with aftermarket, and drove a lot of like the early work that the industry did around predictive maintenance and advanced prognostics and building out these big data platforms. So I was very close to the build out of Skywise and some of these other platforms that have been deployed in industry over the last decade. And that's really where I built my niche, so to speak.
There's a lot about that I didn't know. Thank you for sharing that. So you talked a couple of times about IBM. What was the what propelled you forward, I guess, ultimately to Spark Ignition and really ultimately to founding SkyThread? How did that journey go?
Great question. So, IBM was very, very, very early in what we can recognize today as the AI revolution,
Hmm.
right? And I'll argue that they were deeply prescient on use case and the patterns in which we'd interact with this technology, right? So you can remember, 15 years ago, IBM had that computer that played Jeopardy. That
Oh,
begat
Watson.
Watson, right?
Yeah.
And Watson didn't transpire, to I guess the way we thought it would back in that time. But the entire concept of how you can interface with AI as if we're another human being,
Hmm.
have that natural language interface with computers. Also, how AI can help find patterns at a speed, and at a level of complexity that would be very, very difficult for humans. That really touching upon the core value drivers of this technology. I think IBM was on the money. Unfortunately, IBM Watson was not the platform that ended up becoming ubiquitous, right? With
Right.
the technology, it didn't scale. And now, we're doing, what IBM promised 10, 15 years ago with ChatGPT and Gemini these other generative AI systems.
Right.
But I was intertwined with the build out of this world of this promise, as well as the setbacks at the time
Right.
before we had the compute power and the access to data to invent these broader large language systems. And what brought me to this startup, Spark Cognition, was they had taken some of the technology that we had built at IBM, licensed it, and were working to expand it to solve particular problems relevant to our industry and to my customers that I was very, very interested about.
Okay.
And ultimately, I was persuaded to go over there, not simply by Spark Cognition themselves, but a joint customer of ours, Honeywell.
Wow.
And it was work that I was doing with Honeywell that again prompted that move. I was only there for a year and a half.
Okay.
Again, this was before the world of generative AI made the vision and the promise reality.
Right.
Right, and we continued to struggle in delivering capability that matched, right, what we let's just say envisioned, espoused at the time. Let's say marketed, and it's just a journey of ping ponging around. I joined then DXC as they were building out this really very interesting program that was more broader than just AI. So
Hmm.
I wanted a break from AI for a little bit. Now there's no break from AI, but back then there was we wanted a break from AI, and DXC was building out this digital transformation program,
Okay.
uh, and DXC again for aerospace and defense, they're a major player.
Yeah, they are.
They do a ton of work with Boeing and RTX and Textron and Lockheed and others, and they're a huge player in the airline space as well, which attracted me because a lot of the big tech companies and a lot of the all of the consultancies do not serve the market together, right?
Right.
There's a group that serves the manufacturers, there's a group that serves the airlines. And I felt that with DXC, even though they themselves also had these separate groups, I could work across both domains and build something novel, right, and of value again in the aftermarket space, which is where I've been focused. So
Right.
DXC was a great home for a few years, and it introduced me to the people that ultimately I started SkyThread with. So.
Wow, what a story. So, it's funny. Short story, IBM, short story, Airbus, short story, Honeywell, and ultimately the road right into SkyThread.
Mm-hmm.
I want to take a moment because I want to talk to you a little bit about that. But I'll be honest with you. I understand a 40,000-foot overview of what I think you guys are doing, but I want to take a couple of moments and maybe narrow it down a little bit. If you don't mind, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions.
Please.
Sure. So here's the fact. SkyThread is a blockchain-based data network designed specifically for aviation, the purpose of which is to collect, track, and share vital information about aircrafts, its parts, technicians, the ones who work on it, and so on. I mean, I think that was pretty clear, but just in case it wasn't, what does that mean? What is it that
What
you
does it
guys
mean?
are trying to accomplish?
All right. So SkyThread is a data sharing network,
Right.
and it's primarily built for parts traceability. Right? And we understand at an industry level what that is,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully why it's important, right? Because today, um, custodianship on parts, critical life limited parts, serialized parts, non-serialized parts, you have it, is touchy in areas, which leads to things like fraud and right
Great.
excess inventory and uh, lots of inefficiencies in operations, right? Having to maintain paper and having to track, paper down and sometimes can't do it. You know, it, long story short, despite how high tech aviation carries itself,
Hmm.
because it's of course aviation, it's quite remarkable how low tech the operation of aviation is.
I know exactly what you mean on that one.
Yeah, yeah. And I spent a lot of time looking at tackling this problem through the lens of analytics,
Hmm.
big data, and AI and predictive maintenance, and realized that all these great things that we want to do as an industry will only work, will only scale if there was a foundation of trusted data.
Right.
What I mean by that is data that we can verify as accurate.
Correct.
That foundation in our industry, because of its complexity and because of the longevity of parts and the aircraft they go on, frankly, I mean, fundamentally, it doesn't exist, right? So the theory behind SkyThread is to create this foundation, right? We've looked at RFID, physical tagging of parts, right? Stamping, and all sorts of other schemes that try to merge the digital with the physical. And we tend to hit roadblocks in all of these attempts pretty early on, again because of the complexity of our industry, right? If I'm going to RFID a part, now I've changed the part, right? That might involve a recertification or an STC, which cost wise, tanks the ROI
It does.
I would get from doing that. So we needed another way. So recognizing that, um, while we say that broadly the industry is not yet fully digitized, right?
Hmm.
Each major player in the industry, right, brings digital tools and digital platforms and digital archives to bear. Right, everyone has their ERP,
Hmm.
everyone has their maintenance information system. Right, the ecosystem of planes and parts is recorded digitally today. What we need is a way for these systems, which are siloed, to be able to talk to each other to confirm that the information that you have on the part matches the information I have on that same part, matches the information that the OEM has on that same part. So we can build that foundation not by physical tagging or linking the physical to the digital, but we can build that foundation by linking all of our digital systems together and getting them to agree on triangulation. Yeah, right. This history of this part logically makes sense. There, when you have that and someone comes in, with a fraudulent 8130 tag, for
Hmm.
instance, or is tried to pass off a part that is old as new, right? Having that industry-wide digital thread would catch that,
Absolutely.
right? And where changing the physical boundary of parts is, I think, extremely challenging, right? Creating this digital web is doable. So parts traceability, that is the use case driver, right? It's the call to action that has been successful for us. But once this web's created, right, there are whole sorts of use cases, and plenty of use cases I haven't even thought of, or my co-founders haven't even thought of, for which this will be valuable.
Of course. So can you that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I'm a big fan of communication. I'm a big fan of traceability by virtue of what I do and what I've done. I'm a
Mhm.
big fan of destroying the silos that currently exist. Obviously, some for other reasons and including the reasons that you talked about. So can you speak a little bit, I hope I'm going to say this right. Can you speak a little bit about how your permissioned blockchain sort of handles that or aids that or facilitate it actually is a better word?
Sure. So it's I will argue it's very nuanced,
Hmm.
but nevertheless important, right? Why a blockchain, right? And I want to make it very, very clear that our choice and our utilization of a blockchain has nothing to do with cryptocurrency. It
Right.
has it shares none of the negative externalities that we see around crypto,
Right.
particularly around the energy consumption. Right, we don't need any of that because it's as you say, private and permission, which means
Yes.
all it is simply a decentralized database, right? That instead of being um, wholly owned and operated by one entity, right, is coordinated by one entity, but the data sits across all of the different players, right, in that data network, right? Hence, it's distributed. And the question is to again why? It's nuanced, and it's a business reason.
Hmm.
Okay, so there are data networks that exist in our industry today. We think of, for instance, EDI, right? And you have companies like Aero Exchange and B2B Aero that consolidate and broker EDI messages between different players in our industry, from OEM to repair station to airline, etc. Um, you know, these serve a very, very important function and role in our industry. Um, but again, EDI is 20, 25-year-old technology, older than that by now. And the the way they work is that they're essentially men in the middle, right? So they function by taking your data, right, and they're taking custodianship of your data, and they're sharing it with others as you see fit, right?
Okay.
But they are custodians of your data. In a blockchain, right, the distributed nature of the network removes the middleman,
Okay.
right? So in a blockchain, you're the custodian of your data, right? I'm the custodian of my data. And the role SkyThread plays is not that of a middleman, but that of a facilitator
Facilitator.
that allows me to share my data with you under my control, and you vice versa. So again, it's subtle, it's nuanced. But our theory is that for the type of use cases that we're driving, which are not, make this very, very clear, they're not the same as those EDI use cases,
Right.
right? And we're not competing or trying to replace EDI. Right? We're focused as a layer above, working on bridging all the technical data together so that you can solve things like, right, fraudulent parts. Having that distributed network, our belief is enables scale, enables everyone to participate in a way that a centralized sharing system would not. That's
Uh,
why, we leverage the technology.
I appreciate that answer. I think it makes a little bit more sense. I read on your website your four P's model, the planes,
Mhm.
parts, people, and places, which I think sort of encapsulates, in my opinion at least, it encapsulates the value add that I think you just went through. And I
Yeah.
think it's really important. And as a side note, I think you guys have a white paper published on your website that I would recommend everybody to read. That was
Yeah.
one of the first things that I saw.
Yeah, that's been out there for a while. But the truth of the matter is that the problem we're solving, and the vision around it isn't new, right?
It's
This is
not.
something that has iterated, that has developed over decades, right? And it developed, with my co-founders and I, when we were all at bigger companies. And this is the other raison d'etre around SkyThread. It developed around time at IBM and DXC, and my co-founders, time principally at PwC and at Bearing Point.
Right.
Where he's been, I'm talking about, of course, Chuck Marks, right? The godfather of this, so to speak, going back years and years and years. What Chuck and I realized, we met each other at the Paris Air Show in 2019, and that was what really just dated all of this.
Right.
Is that delivering this industry digital thread is not something that a company that just simply provides services to this industry can do, right? It's not something that a Microsoft or an Amazon or an IBM or a PwC or Deloitte can do all their own, because those companies aren't configured or equipped to do it.
That's a good point.
To be a dedicated company, a company of the industry whose sole focus was making this happen.
Absolutely.
And that was piece one for SkyThread. Piece two is that company needs to be neutral, right? And that's the sort of the critical edge. It needs to be neutral. It has to be of the industry, like we like to say. It has to be of the industry, but it can't be in the industry. It can't be an airline, an OEM, an MRO
Correct.
distributor, right?
Correct.
Because we've seen players in the industry, MROs, distributors, OEMs, etc., try this, and it works, but it doesn't scale, and it doesn't scale to the conflict of interest.
So it does. It absolutely does.
Yeah.
It does. It reminds me, and I hope this is a good analog, and I'll move on, but it reminds me of a particular company who wants to control its own escrow account. It just doesn't really work. There's absolutely no reason how in any universe that's really a good idea. So I'm glad you brought that point up. So I want to ask you a two-part question, if I may, and if it doesn't make sense, stop me. This is my impression. I think SkyThread looks at, or envisions rather, is a better word, some sort of consortium of aviation stakeholders operating the blockchain as a neutral utility layer. I think that's in line with what you just talked about. Mm-hmm. The second, actually, that's a comment and then a question. Sorry, I said two questions. How does that impact your day-to-day at SkyThread? And if that's accurate, how does it weigh on the decisions that you make in order to help shape the company?
Right. So you raised a really important point. You said a critical word in there, which is consortium. Mm-hmm. Right. And this has always been the fine line, so to speak, that we recognize from a governance standpoint. Consortium is absolutely necessary. Mm-hmm. So we created one, and it's not SkyThread, but I, as the founder of SkyThread, with my co-founders, created separately a new consortium to tackle these problems of governance, and it's called the Independent Data Consortium for Aviation.
Okay.
And I sit on the board, having put in a lot of effort to launch it. But I sit on the board with digital leaders from Airbus and Parker Aerospace and Safran and Lufthansa and United and I'm always forgetting one, and I apologize. But we have lots of folks engaged across the industry in this effort. Lots of folks engaged. And the role there is to, whether they're going to operate a network down the road, I don't know. The reason we didn't say, okay, let's just have SkyThread be a consortium, is that consortiums work very, very slowly, right? And we started SkyThread in the middle of the pandemic. There was urgency. We needed other means to more quickly build out the infrastructure.
Right,
which we now have built out. The role for the consortium is how to govern the infrastructure, right? And that is how we envision all of this working, and that's what we've set up to do.
So if I can sum it up, I think what you just said, and correct me if I'm wrong at any point, I think this ensures fair rules,
Yep.
fair data access and usage, and it
Mhm.
also allows industry control without centralized ownership all at the same time, kind of, sort of, right?
Correct.
That's perfect. That's brilliant, actually. Um, before we start to wind down a little bit, how are you building your team? What are you doing to build your team? How is the company sort of getting better day by day, better than yesterday, better than the day before? And I guess if I had to load up the question is, what do you look for when you're building those teams? How do you ensure that the overall everything that the team is doing is headed in that direction that we just talked about?
It's a great question. And it changes because, as you know, starting a company from scratch is a topsy turvy type of journey.
100% agree.
But I'll speak to things that have always been at least sort of bedrock principles. I mean, we need um, in order to drive an industry transformation, especially an industry like aviation
Right.
and aerospace, which is a very difficult industry to work in. Right? We need people who walk the walk, talk the talk, who are trusted, who have credibility.
Hmm.
And from the outset, right, I built SkyThread with a team of people who all are deep industry veterans, whether they're people like Chuck, uh, serve the industry from a position of consultancy, or my French co-founders who come from industry, from senior
Okay.
leadership positions, right? And then in terms of building out the business development team, when we look for people who have industry background, right? Software selling skills, hugely, very, very important as well.
Hmm.
Um, what I've learned in the 4 years of doing this is that, you know, I mean, I've run software teams, software sales teams. I've sold hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of enterprise software in heavy industrials, right, over the last 15 years. Aerospace is always complex and long, so is everything else,
It is. It
right?
absolutely is.
But you want to find the mix of people who um, have relationships, have experience, but also are adept at selling something novel, something that is very much blue ocean. That's not easy, right?
It's
It,
not.
it, it is consultative in its very core. So that's what we look for in terms of building out the team, and then on the tech side. And I'll admit, our focus from get go has been market first, right? It's capturing a right constellation of players in market, right? Now, having done that, now we're reinvesting in the tech, and we have a terrific tech team that we're very very fortunate to have that is taking the V1 that we've built, which is very much a V1, right, and turning into something scalable and efficient and pristine, and something that we can go the whole 9 yards with.
That's brilliant. I for some similar reasons, a lot of different reasons, I personally relate, and for what it's worth, agree with what you just said. My previous journey, I did something similar within aerospace and defense. Currently trying to do the same thing with ERP Aero, and I think for what it's worth, your comment is spot on. A couple of other questions before we wrap up, easier, if that's okay with you.
Please.
Okay.
Yep.
What's one moment, whether it's personal or whether it's professional, that changed basically how you look at your work or your mission? That one moment that you can think of.
I'll go back to a moment early in my career that has shaped my view on pretty much everything I've done since, right? To a T, and maybe too much so. Uh, so so between my first jobs out of college is a software engineer, and my time at IBM, I had this opportunity to do another startup. It was my first startup,
Right.
which yeah has nothing to do with aerospace. It's in the music industry of all things,
Wow. Okay.
right? But it was an online licensing platform, and had some complexity to it, right? And it was me and two other people, right? I at the time was the chief technology officer, but this was my first real exposure in understanding the business side of tech, right? And it was my first exposure to writing business plans. It was my first exposure to understanding and driving, sales cycle, something that I got very adept at my IBM career. But it was my co-founder that told me, as I was really focused on making sure we had the best of everything, the best engine, the best object relational
Right.
mapper, right? We're using the very the most avant-garde technologies. The things were done the most, ingenuine, intelligent, clever, beautiful way. It was my co-founder there who said, "You have to understand, Mark, that in life technology doesn't matter. The technology doesn't matter, right?" And it's a bold thing to say, and he said it at a time of turmoil. And he is absolutely right. And that was for me. And of course, the technology matters, but what he was saying is that what will define our success is not having the best, right, middleware. It's not having the best platform. It's not having the best architecture. It's having the best product fit to customer,
Yep.
right? And that is what turned me from being, an engineer into being a product and business executive.
That's an amazing story. I'll spare you online my answer to that question, but I'll tell you the ending. I was 23 or 24 years old. I had never done it yet, whatever it was, but I wanted to do it. So the only thing I knew about was titles and corner offices, and I had somebody very near and dear to me at the time that taught me that the number one objective is to get it done and get it done right. Even if your title is chief toothpick counter, it doesn't matter. Do the job right and the rest comes easy. So I know it's not the same thing as what you said, but the lesson was all the same powerful for me as well as the one that you just shared. Last question, if I may.
Yes.
Behind all the roles and titles, what's something that people might see or might not? I'm sorry, might not see about the way that you lead or think. Something that makes you you, but something that escapes them.
That is a good question. I have to think about that. Something that makes me me, but escapes them. So, and we all have our strengths and weaknesses. God knows I have my weaknesses. Um, One thing at the core that makes me me, right, is I am stoically optimistic.
I can absolutely relate. Sorry to interrupt. I can absolutely relate.
All right. So I'm the one that, looks at things being better than they are. But at the inverse, I'm the one that also knows that when things are really, really bad, that's just for now.
Yep. Ultimately, you get the job done, and that's what it's about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I told you at the beginning of this conversation, I typically, even after all these years, still get nervous at certain things. I always do. I always will. I worry about A, I worry about Z, I worry about every letter in between. But regardless of where everything is, I get the job done, and that's the number one goal that I go after. Mark, I enjoy this a lot, man. I want to thank you so much
Thank you very much,
for
Ralph.
coming on with me. I learned a lot more than I expected, and I'm a big believer in SkyThread's message. I'm a big believer in the things that you shared that got you to the point where you are and are helping SkyThread further develop that message. I don't think SkyThread, if people don't know about it yet, I think they will, and the ones that do already understand. Again, I urge everybody to go to their website, learn skythread.com or .arrow. I'm sorry.
Not arrow.
Skythread.arrow, one word, skythread.arrow. Read the white paper that I referred to at the beginning of this conversation. Take a look at what they do. I think it's amazing. Mark, thank you again for coming on to the show.
Ralph, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You got it. You got it. Thanks. Hold on.